Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question-and-answer session of today's conference call. At that time, you may press star 1 if you'd like to ask a question. Today's conference call is being recorded, and if you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Carrie Brooks. Thank you, ma'am, and you may begin.
Thank you, Mandy, and thank you for joining us for this webinar entitled Taking American SMEs Global with Google. My name is Carrie Brooks, and I'm a Senior International Trade Specialist with the U.S. Commercial Service, based in the field office in San Diego. Our federal agency has trade professionals over 100 cities and more than 75 countries to help U.S. companies get started in exporting or increasing sales to new global markets. We provide free counseling, market research, sales leads, and logistical training to companies with products or services that have at least 51% U.S. content. In President Obama's State of the Union address on January 27, 2010, he announced a national export initiative, a critical new effort that will lead to long-term sustainable economic growth for the United States. The President's goal is to double exports by 2015, an increase that will support 2 million jobs. To that end, the Information and Communications team within the U.S. Commercial Service is doing a series of webinars focused on the tools and contacts to help promote your business internationally. This is the first in this particular series. You'll be receiving notices of other programs when they are announced. Before we begin, we need to cover just a few logistics. You should be able to hear the audio portion over your telephone and watch the program through the connection sent to you via email. Your phones will be muted during the presentation, and at the end, we'll ask the operator to open up the lines and give instructions on how to ask questions one at a time. At any time, you can also pose questions through a menu bar at the top of your webinar screen, which we'll address at the end also. I'd now like to turn over the program to our esteemed guest speakers, both directors at Google Incorporated, Mr. Lisa Knox and Mr. Alan Moss. They will be assisted by Michael Galvez, Google's Translate Product Manager, for technical questions. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Google.
Thank you, Carrie, and welcome all to this seminar. Special thanks to the U.S. Department of Commerce for hosting the event. We're really excited to have the opportunity to talk today about how Google is helping small and medium-sized businesses in the U.S. to compete on an international scale. We'll outline how we can help your business go global and increase exports by leveraging some of the unique products and tools that we have at our avail here at Google. If you can go to the next slide, a little bit of a quick introduction on us. This is Alan Moss speaking. I'm the Director for America's Online Sales here. And I look after our mid-market advertisers, probably like a lot of our attendees today, throughout North, South, and Central America, and help them to grow their businesses. And with me today, I'm very lucky to have Eliza Knox. Eliza's an American by birth, but has been residing in Singapore and heads up our Asia-Pacific region. It's Eliza who's been driving the development of many of these tools and products to make it easier for small and medium-sized businesses to find and exploit international opportunities out there. And we've asked Eliza to speak today to share some of the tools that she's developed and learn from her experiences in this area. Before she begins, I want to share a few interesting statistics about the U.S. economy and how export plays a role. As Carrie also mentioned, we have Michael Galvez. He's the product manager who's developed many of these tools and will be able to go a bit deeper if there are any technical questions. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the opportunities of going global. Now, in the United States, we're lucky we work in one of the largest markets out there with something like 240 million consumers. But the good news is there are about 8 times more consumers out there outside the borders of our country, something like 1.9 billion consumers globally, and this number is getting larger and larger with the proliferation of new technologies like smartphones that are definitely taking off in some of the developing markets. Now, while it hasn't been popular broadly in the press, the U.S. dollar's depreciation since 2002 is helping ensure that U.S. products are very competitive overseas. And it's for this very reason why we see things like tourism from international visitors hitting record levels, such as 10 million visitors in New York City alone last year. So it's a great time to be exporting as a U.S. business. We also know that companies that reach for international markets not only help their reputations, but they build much more durability into their business. They have greater diversification in terms of where their revenue is coming from. They're less susceptible to particular cycles that may hit one region or one market, and are able to diversify the reach overall. So in a very broad way, export and going global is good for all businesses. Now, if we go to the next slide, we see that there are many companies in the United States who are selling internationally very successfully with Google AdWords today. And here are just a few examples on this next slide. We see that the types of companies that are successful with us really range from companies like Threadless, who are manufacturers of T-shirts, and they're reaching over 20 markets outside the U.S., and they've grown their business more than 400% year over year. To companies like DigiKey, this is a distributor of electronic products, and they've generated over $400 million in incremental revenue by taking an international approach. And then there are companies like Airbnb. Many of you may not have heard of this company. They're a guest room marketplace, and they partner with Google. They're reaching over 181 countries. So there's a small business with a huge reach. They've grown from 12 employees to 130 employees and had more than 800% revenue growth when they started to take on the opportunities in these international markets. So a service company, and in many ways they're able to access an international market in unprecedented ways with these products. So that opportunity is out there. There are great examples that we're going to talk about throughout this presentation to hopefully give you some analogs and some examples of these 50,000 companies that are already advertising with Google and reaching international markets very effectively. If we go to the next slide, before I turn it over to Lisa, I want to make sure that folks have a very basic primer in AdWords, which is our flagship advertiser program, and basically allows companies to reach relevant markets and find consumers wherever they may be searching for your goods or services. The important thing to know about AdWords is, first of all, your advertising is totally under your control. You create your ads yourself. You pick keywords that correlate with the services that you offer and the goods that you offer. Your ads will appear on search results that hopefully many of you have experienced through Google when you're looking for relevant information. And most importantly, it's one of the best returns on investment that one can make in their business. You only pay for search ads when people click on their ad, and usually they're going to be clicking to learn more about your goods or services, or better yet, to even purchase them. So there's a very direct and measurable experience between the ads that you put on Google and with the AdWords product and the results that you'll see in your business. If you go to the next slide, you'll see an example of a typical search results page. And basically what you're hopefully familiar with is on the right-hand side are paid ads, as well as on the top box there with the dotted line around them. These are the places that for a typical search, your business's ads, if the search term is relevant, would appear. And it's a great opportunity not only within the U.S. but international to reach your audience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who's going to walk you through how to get started using AdWords to find a global market and begin thinking about how you really export using Google AdWords and the tools we've created.
Okay. Hi, I'm Eliza. Delighted to be here with you today. If you can go to the next slide about showing how Google can take your business global, please. Today we're going to talk about the things that you already know from running a business, which is that you need to find customers, you need to communicate with them, and then you need to sell to them. The only difference being we're going to talk about doing this outside of the United States. So, next slide, find global customers. As Alan mentioned, there's about 1.6 of the 1.9 billion global customers outside the United States. And even if you're advertising outside the U.S. already, but only doing it in English, there's probably another 1.4 billion customers that you can get to, which is really a big opportunity. And we have a tool called Global Market Finder that helps you can see where customers are from, and it helps you understand what you might need to pay to advertise in those countries. So let me show you how that works on the next slide. You go to translate.google.com/Global Market Finder, and you will have this information after today's webinar, so you don't need to write these down. But that's the first step. You go to that URL. And then you put in something about your business. So, for example, today you're in the United States and you're using English. Then you put in the terms, or keywords is what we usually call them with AdWords. In this case, we've used an example of hats. So hats, caps, berets, baseball hats, something like that. And you put in step 4 over on the right in the Finder what country or what region you'd like to advertise in. So in this case, we've selected Europe. And then you press the button next to the number 5 here that says Find Opportunity. So that is what your screen will look like when you do this on your computer. If you go to the next slide, what you'll see is what your screen looks like after you press Find Opportunity. So you'll see, for example, here, Turkey, France, United Kingdom, Germany. And there's little plus signs next to each country. So if you wanted to dig deeper into how that looks in the country, you would push on the plus. But basically what you see on this first screen is how big is the opportunity. That's the blue bars under opportunity. Under 6, you'll actually see the monthly searches for that term in their home language. And in 7, we have a couple ways of showing you how competitive that is. We have what is the bid price, approximately, that you would need to get those keywords. How competitive is it, which is shown both by the bar chart and by the intensity of the blue coloring on the map. Basically, the way this works is we're saying to you, here are countries where people are looking for what it is that you want to advertise, and here's about what you'd have to bid. So, for example, you can see that in Turkey, there are a lot of people looking for this, and it's much less expensive to bid than in France. So that shows you where to find the customers. If we move to the next page, communicate with foreign buyers, what we're looking at is you found the customers, but now you need to speak to them in their own language. We have several ways to help you do that. I'm going to focus on 2 here. The first one is the more basic one. It's pure machine translation, and it's called Google Web Element, and it's free. So what it lets you do is have people read your site in their own language, and it also helps you later say how many people came to my site and wanted to see it in Spanish or Portuguese or Italian or German or Chinese. So if we go to the next page, we have an example. Oops. Sorry. Mike, is this in the right place? I think it's not. Okay, it is. Sorry. So here you would go to translate.google.com/translate_tools, and you just paste a small snippet of code into your web page. Sorry for the confusion there. And once you install that, it enables what you'll see on the following page. Communicating with the foreign buyers in their language. So on the left side, you see the website in English, and what the buyer will see is a little insert like what you see in the top right here that says select language. And this particular person has been looking from Brazil or Portugal and wants it translated into Portuguese. So he's gone into that little drop-down menu on the top right, pressed Portuguese, and voila, you can see on the sort of bottom right half of this, he's now getting your entire site in Portuguese. We also have a more sophisticated translation. Sorry.
Next slide.
Sorry, next slide. Communicate with foreign buyers, again, Translator Toolkit. A more sophisticated foreign translation, which combines machine translation with human editing. And it enables you to go in and do some of the editing, or your webmaster to do so. And it easily translates all kinds of marketing collateral, your website, any brochures you want to upload, manuals, leaflets, etc. So if we go to the next page, you go to translate.google.com/toolkit, and you can upload a website, a brochure, an instruction manual into the toolkit. And here we're looking at a luxury villa in Florida. And then next slide, this actually translates the brochure. And what you see happening between steps 3 and 4 is the machines will help you pick out certain words that might not work as well in another language and have you translate them more accurately. Some fun examples that have come up in the past include things like where Google Translate hasn't been used would be, there was a hotel sign in Paris that says, please leave your values at the front desk, meaning your moral values, as opposed to please leave your valuables. Or one that I particularly liked at a Tokyo dry cleaners, where they had a few English-speaking customers. They used only machine translation without checking, and it said, drop your pants here for best results, which of course was something like leave your trousers here, but it didn't come out quite that way. So the way these webinars work, I can't hear you, but I hope you're laughing. I found those examples particularly amusing. So in the case that you might have some sensitive wording or things that you think you want to check on how they look, you might go for this more sophisticated translation option. Particularly if you've trialed the first one, the web element that we showed you, and seen that there were a lot of visitors in a particular language, you might choose that language to do the higher end translation. So we found you the customers. We've talked about how to speak to them into their own language, and then tips on writing for a global audience. The slide that you should be on is just some general things beyond translation. In terms of reaching a foreign audience, you want to use simple, clear language that's not confusing, and then you want to customize terms. Remember that even if you can translate, you want to use the terms that your audience uses. So in some places people call it, for example, a cell phone, some places a mobile phone. You want to make sure you're using measurements that they use. If you're selling things in weights, do pounds, do kilos, whatever they use. Make sure the size, if it was a U.S. shoe size, that's great. Otherwise, put it in the European shoe size or the Australian. And lastly, absolutely paramount, put it in their currency. Okay, so we figured out how to find some customers beyond English speaking and beyond the U.S. We figured out how to talk to them in their own language and terms that they need to know. Now, let's close the sale. So, if you're going to move on to selling, the next thing you would do is log into an AdWords account to post some ads. And this shows you what that AdWords account would look like. So you would log in to adwords.google.com. And then, number 2, this gives you an example of Ugg boots, but you could have plenty of other products where you've launched in to look at your campaign, and you've gone down to your settings, and down in number 3. And number 4, you're picking 2 things. You're picking the location, in this example, Australia, and you're picking the languages. You can see down below, all languages. And so you can go down there and edit and pick which language you want to use. So alternatively, you might be picking, we looked at the hats before, you might be picking berets, and then in France, and you would pick French language. And then, when you go into the location, you can also, where it says Sell Anywhere, page 19, pick bundles, groups of countries, or a particular country. And in some countries, you can actually go down to very specific geo-targeted or city locations within the country. In this particular example, we're now selecting France and Germany. You can also choose to exclude areas. So, for example, we had an earlier case where we translated into Portuguese, You might be picking Brazil, but wanting to exclude Portugal, even though they speak Portuguese there. Moving on to the next slide of Sell Anywhere, what we're showing you here is that you not only will exhibit your ads on Google sites, but if you've chosen to do so, you can show your ads with many Google search partners and display network partners. And here we're just showing you the logos of some of the various partners we have all over the world. And you can see we have them in Australia, Rakuten is in Japan, we have Web.de in Germany, you can see on the right side CareerJet in the UK. So all of these give you some ideas of the breadth and the scope of the markets you are able to reach if you choose by selecting the geographic locations and the languages all over the world. Then finally, as U.S. businesses, you can also close the sale using Google Checkout. It's a product that we have that offers your customers a faster way to pay. You can receive payments from any country in any currency, you can ensure that they are safe and secure, and you can protect against fraud and chargebacks. And this is located at checkout.google.com. So, one more slide on this to show you what it looks like for the customers, because, of course, they do need to pay you for this to work for both of you. They shop on your site, and you can see here some lava lamps. Number 2, they begin the checkout process, and you can see what will have happened if you have installed Google Checkout. Number 3, they sign into checkout, and number 4, they buy. Very simple, very succinct. So these are the various steps to actually get going globally. You've found some customers, you've figured out how to speak to them in their language, and you have a way to close the sale and for them to pay. And for Alan and I, this is one of the most gratifying things to do, is to help small and medium-sized businesses go through these steps, internationalize their business, and grow. And if you can skip to slide 24, the ads for global advertisers, I just want to remind you, all the stuff we've covered, you can find at google.com/AdWords/global advertiser. And going one more slide, just like Alan said, this may sound daunting, and we've gone through the tools quickly, but of course you can go back and spend a lot of time on them. But there are lots and lots of companies out there like you who are doing this. So it may sound overwhelming, but it isn't. So Yaya Creations, who does wedding supplies, they're exporting to 128 countries with us. Life Ionizers, who create healthy water products, translated their site into only 5 languages, and yet they're growing in Asia, Africa, and Europe. And Zazzle, which does custom prints and has been around domestically for about 6 years, has now expanded to 17 other countries. So there are even more examples on our websites of both American and non-American companies that have done this, but you can do it. And we just wanted to spend the time with you to show you that really is feasible for any small, medium-sized business who wants to do this to go global. So we'll finish up here. We'll open up for questions, and either Alan or I or Mike can take any questions you might have.
Great. That was terrific, Lisa. I'll just close out here in saying that we're really excited to work with small and medium-sized enterprises. We know that it's these sort of businesses that have so often been the engine of U.S. growth and jobs in our country, and there's never been a better time for small and medium-sized businesses to adopt more global vision and really work to find the markets out there that need your products. Our hope is that eventually all of our business in the U.S. will not see international growth as foreign, but as really a core to their business strategy and how they're building their businesses for long-term success and competitive advantage. I strongly believe the tools that Lisa has just gone through are incredibly powerful. It's hard to imagine these tools a few years ago, how quickly one could validate there's a market for your products, understand how to communicate efficiently in different languages, and close sales overseas in such a seamless manner. So we do encourage you all to explore these tools. They're even better real-time and interactive and easy to use. So don't forget, there's 50,000 other U.S. advertisers already using the tools we've shown you today, and we hope hundreds more after our conversation today.
Okay. So, sorry, actually, I can see some of the questions, Alan, so I'm going to start addressing them because they're not technical, and then Mike can chime in. So the first question that we see is...
Just before you get started, Lisa, can you show my face on the slides? Oh, good. Sorry, before it was supposed on my face.
Okay, so the first one is this free? Yes, everything we've shown you is free except for AdWords itself. So when you advertise, as Alan said, you design your ads, you tell us where to put them, where to show them, and if people click on them, whether that's in France where you've decided to show them or Zimbabwe, then you pay. But everything else up to then is free. I think there was another question about, do industrial suppliers use our service? Yes. One example that I can think of off the top of my head are a number of people who make gravel crushers, primarily in China, but not solely, and these are used to pave roads. And we have a number of clients who export those to developing countries that are building roads, which tend to be in Africa and some in Latin America. So in those cases, what happens that is sometimes different than some of the examples that we gave you is that the industrial provider uses the website to find leads, not to completely close the sale. So they will consider a converted lead to not necessarily be selling the wedding dress or selling the custom prints like Zazzle, but to be getting the business-to-business or B2B, we sometimes call it, lead. And yes, we have a number of those examples and could follow up with you on those.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say here in the States we have lots of industrial companies like that. And as Elisa said, a lot of times folks think they can't sell those goods online, but if you think about what industrial companies are doing to find their international markets, they're doing exactly what we're talking about, which is finding interested customers who want to learn more and then connecting them with smart product and salespeople to help them navigate and figure out how they can solve their problems and meet their needs.
Lisa, do you want to continue going through the online questions, and we'll also ask the operator, Mandy, to open it for audio questions?
Sure. I'm really sorry. I cannot read the online questions right now. Could you call one or two of them out?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll start with Mary, who asks, will a U.S.-based company find it impossible to take money from China-based users asking to pay via China Union Pay, or CUP as it's known? Does Google Checkout accept China's Union Pay debit card?
I'm not sure, Carrie, how do we get back to them? So generally, China Union Pay has a link with Visa and MasterCard outside the country. But if they're using China Union Pay debit, I am not sure. So they have that for credit. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd be happy to...
What I would suggest, if we don't have an answer right now, is everyone should have my contact details. It was on their registration and also on their login details. They can send me that email question, and I'll forward it to the appropriate group within Google.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Okay, next question. Joan asks, what type of code is necessary for the translator?
I can answer. This is Mike. I can answer that question. So I assume that question is around the web element for Google Translate. And so that code is actually just a little bit of JavaScript that you embed into your web page. So it's really just JavaScript.
Right. Next question from Mark. How do you secure against fraud and chargebacks?
So, go ahead.
So, look, in any business, you're dealing with some level of risk management. And what I would say is it's very similar to the same process that you're dealing with in the United States. So verifying, location details, getting similar sort of details that you would with through whoever your payment processor is. is the best way to really manage against that.
But I think the client might have been saying, how do we, because we said that checkout helps secure against that, so we're using, like other card companies, like the card companies do, we're using basically neural networks and ways to try to understand if these people should be charging to you. And again, on that one, we can get back to Carrie, but we can send you the link to checkout and how it works and what you can do with it. You can also just Google checkout, and it will give you all the details.
Yeah, there's actually some really excellent presentations on the Google pages about how checkout works. So I would suggest everyone take a look at that as well. The next question is from Patty, and she says, if I want to have 50-plus languages, can I also have the ability to fine-tune select languages?
This is Mike again. Yes, absolutely you can. So if you go to the Translate web element page, you can see that URL in the presentation that Eliza and Alan just went through. You can actually fine-tune the languages. So you can say, for example, that, you know what, I don't want to do business with language X. Let's say, for argument's sake, I don't want to show Swahili users translations in Swahili. So you can basically opt out of Swahili. Another use case for that is that if your website is already, say, translated into English and into Spanish and into French, you can actually easily disable this using the Translate web element as well. So you can find all the instructions on that site.
We've got a number of questions about getting a copy of the webinar, and it is recorded, and we will be sending out the link again. In your original login details, at the very bottom, there was a notice on how to download a copy for the next 30 days.
Okay, there's also, Carrie, a number of questions about tax and duties, and so Google does not take responsibility for that. We do have a number of links to websites to give you information on that on the URL that we showed you in the second to last slide, the Google Ads for global exporters, but also we, I believe the U.S. government has a number of sites that give you the basics of that information. And Carrie, you might want to address that.
Okay, just a second here.
I think that...
I'm sorry, I was trying to fix something on my computer at that time, but...
Okay, Carrie, what I mentioned is that people are asking about taxes, duties, import restrictions.
Right, our organization, that's one of the reasons we actually exist. So anything like that, logistical questions, we're able to help with both from our local office and feet on the street and our embassies and consulates overseas. Okay, the next question is from Isaac. He says, I'm confused in what language our keywords will display in. So if we choose keyword hat and to display it in France, what will they see? Also, will it show in google.com or google.fr or whatever the domain name is for France?
I can answer this, Eliza. So there's different things to consider. I think there's a little bit of confusion. So Global Market Finder, which is what Eliza had shown, that basically where she put in something like hats, and it translates them into all those other languages. The way that the reason why Global Market Finder exists is really just to help advertisers or businesses like yourselves reach customers overseas, right? So really what it's doing is it's really saying something along the lines of we're using Google Translate, some information on search traffic, on interest for your product overseas, to kind of figure out where is the best place for you to export. So I think if I recall correctly in that slide, it sort of showed that Turkish perhaps was one of the best ones, likely because there's a very large population in Turkey. The bid prices are probably relatively low in Turkey, and so on and so forth, and the competition is quite low there. So we think that's a really good place for you to start exploring export. In terms of running the actual keywords themselves, that's actually separate from Global Market Finder. What you need to do is when you go into AdWords, right? I don't know if the person who asked the question is already an AdWords advertiser or someone who's considering AdWords. When you go into AdWords, you can actually, there's a ton of settings that's inside there where you can say something like, for Turkish users in the United States, I want to bid on these particular keywords that are actually in Turkish. I can also say that for Turkish users in Turkey, I want to show them, I want to use these particular keywords and these particular ads are going to show up. along with those keywords, and so on and so forth. So the most concise answer to your question is that all of these different things are actually configurable through AdWords itself. So you can target, for example, Turkish speakers in Turkey, English speakers in Turkey, perhaps vacationers who are coming from Germany and visiting Turkey. You can mix and match language, language for your keywords, language for your ads, and the locale in which we display these ads to whatever you want based all through AdWords.
And for example, an unusual way to use that is there are, I believe, 3 million Japanese speakers in Brazil. So in order to capture that market, you could even do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's pretty, AdWords is a very, very powerful platform, right? When you think about it, even just in the United States, you can do something like, you can search on, you can bid on keywords that are in English because most of the users in the U.S. are in English, but 15% of our population is Hispanic, right? And what you can actually do is you can do things like, I want to target Hispanic users in the U.S. using Spanish keywords. I can target them using English keywords. I can even target them using Spanglish keywords. And then also mix and match. Some of the different results that you might find are actually a little bit surprising. So for example, sometimes you'll notice that Spanish users don't prefer to look at keywords that are actually in Spanish. They might prefer a Spanglish keyword as opposed to an English keyword, as opposed to a Spanish keyword.
Great. The next question is, it's great that we can find customers around the world, but there are still lots of legal barriers. For example, the EU requires anyone who is collecting customer information should store it on EU-compliant servers for security. And this is something that we can help with. The Department of Commerce has a program called Safe Harbor, and if you contact one of your local trade specialists, which you can find at export.gov website, we can walk you through that process. And then Google, you may have some comments about that as well.
Yeah, no, we absolutely have to comply with similar EU privacy laws, and all of our technology is similarly compliant. I think it's a cost of doing business, but well worth it, we found.
Okay, the next question comes from Ronald. Since Google charges by the number of hits, how do you defend against an artificially sabotaged by software manipulation that inordinately increases the number of hits on the website ad, for example, by a competitor?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We call that click fraud, and we wouldn't have been able to grow our business to the extent we have if we had not developed very sophisticated technologies to detect when there are bots or machines or other fraudulent clicks being generated on ads. And what we do is we not only detect it, but we filter it out from any of the activity that actually ends up going to an advertiser. So those same processes and technology applies whether you're posting ads in the United States or in any of the foreign markets in which we work.
Okay, and Greg asked, how are most people doing freight with international sales? Can most companies calculate a freight rate to include in price? And again, this is something we could help with, but I'm looking for any response from Google.
I think that's better. Sort of the actual doing business part with duties, shipping, laws is something where we have links to other websites, but we're not in a position to advise.
Yeah, and in our office, the U.S. Service are able to do that, and we can walk someone through the process as well.
Okay, great.
Okay. If Google Checkout is free, how do they make money?
So just to clarify that, Google, the actual access to the product is free. You are charged on a per transaction basis. Again, if you go to our checkout website, if you Google checkout, as Elisa said, you'll get all the details there, and I think you'll find that it's a very easy product to not only integrate into your website, but also very cost-effective, especially when you compare it to other options with merchant accounts and other options out there.
And Ronnie asked, how are the variances in exchange rates taken into account when using checkout?
They're not. I mean, you're using checkout as with any other card company, you are at risk on the exchange rates. You can, different companies do different things. There are ways for merchants to do dynamic currency translation on the spot for the customer. So you can say to the customer, you can pay in your currency, or if you wanted to, although we advise against it, you could continue to price in U.S. dollar. But the exchange rate variability will impact you.
And Patrick asks, it sounds great if you're selling similar widgets. However, what if you're selling used parts for equipment or machinery? And there is quite a large used equipment market overseas.
For sure, and we have lots of used equipment sellers not only in the U.S. but also that are exporting with us as well. I think it's the same sort of process that you're using in the U.S. There may be some issues you have to deal with in terms of tariffs, duties, those sort of things. But we found there's big markets out there, as you know, for those products, and
so I think the thing is,
more thought process.
If they're commodity-like products with a clear price, you can actually sell online. If they are individual, highly negotiated prices for something very specific, then we get back to what I discussed with the gravel crushers, which is what you tend to do online is to find the buyer or supplier, depending which side of that transaction you're on, and then continue negotiations offline. So very often in B2B, in our experience, the use of, to export and to do this online, what you're trying to do is find the leads as opposed to close the sale. And then the sale is closed offline once you have generated the lead.
Jeff asks, how does a U.S. company pay AdWords for ads without using credit cards? Can we, for example, send a U.S. money order for $1,000 that Google could draw against?
There are a number of different payment options. You can prepay with us and then draw down that balance for sure. As you know, you can also use credit cards. There are a variety of different options. And again, would encourage folks to go online to get even more details on that by Googling AdWords and AdWords payment options.
Okay, and this is kind of leads to that. Shirak asks, what is the charge per click, and can a limit be set? Obviously, the charge per click is going to vary by the market.
So there's lots of ways to control your budget, but you don't know the charge per click because every time that there's a chance for you to show your ad against a search, there's a dynamic auction. So Google's running billions of mini auctions a day. So if you're advertising black tennis shoes or black sneakers, every time somebody searches for that, we're running an auction. Who wants to pay how much for this? And you can set the bid at a level that you're comfortable with, and you can set a budget for the day that says, when I've spent this much, stop showing my ad. And you can choose to only show at certain times of day, for example. So there are many, many ways to control how much you spend.
James asks, does Google Checkout require a gateway fee to direct to our merchant account?
No, it's an all-inclusive price. It's one of the benefits of using a product like Checkout is you don't have to assemble different parts of the solution like a gateway fee and a merchant account, etc.
Okay, and Ruth asks, does the translation service need to be applied to the entire page or site, or can it be applied to a microsite?
You can do both. So when you go to the Translate web element page, you can actually select either the web page translator or a sectional translator, which allows for the subpages.
Okay. Mandy, operator, do we have some waiting on the line to ask questions?
No, ma'am, but if they do like to ask a question, please press *1, unmute your phone, and record your name.
Right, thank you. And let's see. Dan asks, how will this work for highly technical products such as chemicals and products used in medical research? One concern is translating technical terms.
I can answer that question. So highly technical products, such as chemicals and products used in medical research, machine translation is not always perfect, but the second tool that Eliza had shown you, which was the Google Translator Toolkit, this actually allows for things like the inclusion of glossaries. So when you include glossaries, these are very, very hard to translate terms. You can actually add them into your glossary, and we will actually use these different translations and show them to the translator so that the translator can actually make the correct and the most appropriate translations, even for these most difficult terms.
Right. Joshua has more questions about the competitive ranking and asking what statistics go into that figure.
So I think when you're talking about competitive ranking, you're talking about ad ranker, the order in which your ad appears on Google search results. And it's really a factor of a few things. The most important being your quality score. So what we're trying to do is there's a quality score which is looking at the question or query being asked in Google search and trying to find the most relevant answers to that question. There is an element as well of the click-through rate. So some demonstrated experience that the information that you have has led to good experiences for advertisers. Your bid can also influence that, but I would strongly recommend that it's really your quality, the quality of the information that you have on your website and the landing page that you're bringing them to when they click on your ad are the greatest drivers of the ad ranking. And what we're really trying to do is both for our users and our advertisers, link them up with the relevant information they're looking for. You don't want leads or clicks from advertisers that are not looking for your products, and vice versa. As a searcher and as users, we also don't want to see results that aren't relevant to the question or service we're seeking.
Sorry, since this isn't super interactive, it's a little hard for us to interpret, but another thing we thought the questioner might have been asking is we did show a slide showing competitiveness in the beginning with Global Market Finder. So there where you talked about competitive ranking of the countries, we were looking at the number of advertisers bidding on that keyword by country. And so you saw that in some countries the keyword was, for example, less expensive in Turkey than in France because we had fewer people advertising into those markets. So one interesting thing that I didn't mention, but as we work with companies seeking to export, sometimes companies say, well, I want to export to the biggest market I can find. So for an American company, I'll export to China or to Brazil or to Germany because there are a lot of people there and they have money. That is one strategy and often works, but it also means that you may find those markets quite competitive. Another strategy that we see some exporters using is they find out, well, gee, this product I have is really popular in Lithuania, and you know what? No one is advertising in Lithuania. And that's what you can find on Global Market Finder. And they say, well, maybe it's a smaller market, but in fact, I might have that market to myself, or there might just be me and another guy, as opposed to 15 hat companies advertising into France. So something to look for when you're using Global Market Finder is the competitive nature of that market, and to decide for yourself whether strategically you want to be in a bigger market that's more competitive or a smaller market that's less competitive. Of course, ideally you want the bigger market that's less competitive, but that's not always available. So hopefully by giving you two answers, we've covered all the possible things that question might have meant.
Exactly, thank you. And if I may chime in here, one of the things that our organization does, the U.S. Commercial Service can help with the size of the markets and free market research and checking with our offices overseas in those smaller, maybe less thought about markets to determine if there is actually an opportunity for you there as well. Coupled with the Global Market Finder from Google, it gives you a really good market strategy. There was a question here about Googlecom versus Google France. I want to know which Google a person might be using overseas, and how do you tell?
I can answer this question as well. So yes, absolutely. When you're going into AdWords and you're selecting the ads in which and the keywords in the ads in which you want to target your ads, you can actually say something like, I want to target users in Google.France, as opposed to Google users who are using the French interface of Google in Google.com. So absolutely.
Okay, and Maria asks, is the translation toolkit free?
Yes, it is.
And another question is, does Google have any plans, or do they connect to any APIs to calculate shipping charges? In other words, are you working with any other companies to plug it in?
I believe, this is Alan, I believe the answer is yes. I think one of the things we're also taking as some feedback is it may be useful to do a similar overview of checkout for folks and all of its capabilities.
Ryan wants to know if it's useful for a business selling a service as opposed to a product. Do you have any examples of service companies?
Tons. So, it depends what kind of service you're talking about and whether you can provide it overseas. But there are people who do global distribution of everything from, they've expanded locksmiths capabilities outside their own country, and then they not only use this, but we didn't talk much about mobile, but they'll use mobile because it would seem that most times you're locked out. Actually, you don't have your PC with you, but you often have your phone, down to software services. So the answer is yes, and it just depends on how widely you want to grow your business and whether you think you can provide that service overseas. But in some senses, it's easier because of a lot of the questions we've been getting just now are about taxes, shipping, and all those logistics go away to some extent when you're providing a service on the ground. I'm not sure if that's what was meant, and there's there's downloadable software that people provide. We have a great example of a Malaysian software provider that sells software that tracks facilities maintenance, and he ships all over the world, so I don't know if you count that as a service, but, yes, there are many examples.
Mandy, do we have any questions waiting on the line?
Yes, ma'am. We have about 5 of them.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and move into that for a moment.
Okay, the first one comes from Wendy Pease. Ma'am, your line is opened.
Hi, I'm calling from Rapport International. We provide foreign language translations. It was interesting to hear how easy you've made it to use the machine translation. You also mentioned that, if you want to make sure that it's correct or you've got stuff that you want to make sure is portrayed accurately, that you have a human translator edit it. Do you do that internally, or you recommend people go out on their own to do that?
This is Mike. Yes, we do not provide this service internally. If you go to the last website that Eliza had shown was the Google Ads for Global Advertisers site, we actually have linked to there a list of different translation service providers.
Oh, okay.
And if she wanted to be included in that list, how would you go about doing that?
If you can, I think, Carrie, your information was shared with the folks who are in the conference, right? So if you can just get in touch with Carrie, I can hop out from there.
All right, thank you so much. That was my follow-up question. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Jack. Your line is open, sir.
Yes, I could understand the way you're presenting the tool to translate material on the website, but how do the AdWords ads and keywords get translated? Does that happen automatically if you pick the language?
No, it does not. So there are different steps in the export workflow, right? So if you're actually just using Google Global Market Finder to find new markets, we do automatically translate your keywords in Global Market Finder. Okay, but as I mentioned before, the keywords that are translated by Global Market Finder, the translations that are really just a byproduct of us trying to figure out where you might want to consider exporting. Okay, if you actually load, so another step in the export workflow is actually translating your keywords and your ad text. Now, Global Market Finder doesn't translate your ad text for you, but when you actually want to take that step, what you can do, if you're already an AdWords customer, is you can load your AdWords file into Google Translator Toolkit. And you can find more information around this on the Translator Toolkit help pages. But if you load your AdWords file, there's a file type that you can extract from AdWords called AdWords Editor Archive, or AEA file. You load it into Translator Toolkit, it will automatically translate your keywords and your ad text for you. Now, what it actually does in that case is it will take a first pass machine translation of your keywords and your ad text. It does a little bit more than that. So what it actually does is it also looks at previous translations of other humans, because we believe that human translation is generally better than machine translation. And we will basically find the best way to pre-translate your AdWords keywords and add text for you. What we would recommend, because ad text translation especially is marketing text translation, right? This is not something that we recommend you go through a machine. What you can do is you can do something like, say, share these files. So in Translator Toolkit, it's just like Google Docs. You can share your translations with other users. So you can share it with either your colleagues if they know foreign languages, or you can share it with a translation agency like Rapport International, who had called in before, and they can actually make these corrections for you.
And information is on the Toolkit help pages. There's information about how all this works?
Absolutely. So here's what I would recommend you do. I would start, for all of these things that we're talking about, there's actually extensive information in the Google Ads for Global Advertisers site. That was the last site that Eliza had shown. If you go through that marketing site, right, so what that site will do is it will walk you through some of these different steps in the workflow. It will show you a lot of information around Global Market Finder. It will show you a lot of information around the Translate web element. It will also show you information around Translator Toolkit, and you can navigate from there to Translator Toolkit itself. And you'll find the Help Center, all the information that you need. There's also a contact link, by the way, at the bottom of the Google Ads for Global Advertiser site. If you cannot find information that you're looking for on there, just feel free to just reach out to us through that contact form.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Isaac. Sir, your line is opened.
Thank you. The previous question actually answered a lot of my questions. I guess my question is, can you target people overseas that are speaking English versus speaking a foreign language? So do we know that by the fact that they search in English, or is there any other way that you can figure that out?
Yes, absolutely. So with AdWords, you can actually choose the languages of the language of the keywords in which you want to bid in. You can also just match this with the language in which the user is using Google overseas. Let's say if they were using, say, Google say .Belgium in French as opposed to Dutch or Flemish is what they call it. You can also use it to target, say, English speakers in Belgium, right? So there's all these different ways to kind of slice and dice your targeting, just so that you'll reach the most important users for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Jorge. Sir, your line is open.
Hey there, from sunny Jacksonville, Florida. I have a quick question on the ads. Do you have to create these ads, or is it just excerpted from your website?
No, you need to create the ads, but we give you some tips on doing it. They're very short. It's quite important that you're clear about what the ad is for, and you do need a call to action, buy, view, whatever, to get people interested, but there's lots of history on that, and we give you some tips on the website. For all of you, depending on how large you get, there are some levels of help available within Google as well. But when you're starting out, it's basically self-serve, and there are lots and lots of tips on how to do this on the AdWords site.
And I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. I noticed when you showed us the slides earlier, that you had the ability to put a phone number there. How does that work? Is that IP telephony, or how does it actually work? Can you click on that and make a phone call?
We have a product, an ad extension called Call Reporting, and if you prefer to drive people to call you, that is one option. It is not recommended putting the phone number in the ad text. And certainly if you're exporting, you need to think about the international calls and having folks that speak in native tongues, etc.
Okay,
another thing, which is, again, not so much export, but just so you know in terms of the product, we do have a mobile product, Click to Call, where you can put the phone number and people can call from the phone. So if they're searching on a smartphone, or even in some countries on a WAP phone, they can do a Click to Call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Anne. Ma'am, your line is open.
Yes. I wanted to know if it's more successful if you have a country-specific domain rather than just a general .com. If you were going to, let's say, Brazil, would you want to have your domain BR instead of a .com? Is there any statistics with that being more successful in an ad campaign?
I don't think we have any clear statistics on that. At the moment, we've seen both work.
Okay.
I think the most important thing is when you're doing it, when you're putting an ad in a particular language, that you bring them to a landing page that is in that same language. We have found that to be generally true. The U.S. Hispanic market may be one where that is somewhat more mixed.
So instead of having the translation page, you would want to always have your landing page in their own country-specific language?
Right. I think if you expect over time to be doing a lot of business in a particular language, you will probably want to have a fully translated website in that domain.
Right.
What's really good with the translate element, the first thing we showed you, is that it's a good way to find out where you're getting customers and what languages they're looking in. And sometimes you'll see, like if you go on the New York Metro, the subway site, or Oregon Gov, people where they don't necessarily have to give too much information in that language. It's to help tourists or to help people in Oregon who aren't as fluent in English. They can leave translate element forever. But I think what we've seen with the more successful advertisers, if they find, for example, we have a New Zealand camper van company that gets a huge amount of traffic from Germany. So they used the translate element, or they found, even with English, they were getting German inquiries. After you find that you have a huge amount of traffic, then you start to think about either fully translating the web page and leaving it in your own domain or moving to a domain in that country.
Let me just kind of reiterate that point, because I think that's a really, really important one, and I wanted to mention one other Google tool that can really help you with this. If you're familiar with Google Analytics, one really useful thing that you can do is if you use the Google Translate web element, exactly as Eliza had mentioned, right? It's really, really good for a cheap experiment, because all of a sudden, your website that was, let's say, was only available in English, if a Brazilian user basically comes into your website, it will automatically translate your site into Brazilian Portuguese. And on top of this, if you have analytics installed, and there's a way to actually embed Google Analytics into the Translate web element, all you need to do is if you go to that site, you put in your analytics code, it will actually give you a lot more important information, such as you will find, for example, that suddenly you're getting Brazilian customers who are coming in. They're going into your website, they're clicking through. You can actually find out if they're going from your home page and then they're trying to transact, and let's say you can find out if there's a point of failure, right? They're able to go all the way through, they want to check out, but then suddenly you realize that the Brazilian user basically says, you know what, I can't actually purchase this because my credit card will only pay in Brazilian reais as opposed to US dollars. But the really, really neat thing, if you use this combination of Google Translate web element and Google Analytics, is that you can actually figure out demand for your products overseas. And then based on that decision, you can make the leap into full localization of your website.
You made a perfect segue, Michael, because our next webinar, which is not scheduled yet, but hopefully in September, will be on analytics. So we'll be sending out emails to everyone who's participated in this program about the next webinar. Yes, I have to interject. I'm on Google Analytics every day when I'm doing my AdWords, because you can run a campaign and you can see immediately if they bounce off or how long they're on the site. It's a beautiful tool. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Amelia. Ma'am, your line is open.
Yes, hi. I would like to advertise in South America and Central America, and I would like to know where, excuse me, I could find the web partners in those countries. Not all of them use Google.
Hello?
Sorry, yeah, what are you looking for in terms of web partner? Do you mean building your website, or are you talking about distribution? I'm sorry.
No, like, for example, in Argentina, there is a website where industrial customers would look for products, which is called paginasindustriales.com. Where would I find that Google has a partner with that web?
So I'm still a little unsure. One thing I do want to say, I don't know what they do, but many, we use the term publishers, but many websites that get a lot of traffic sell space on their website to Google for advertisements. And I showed you one page where it talked about the search partners and the display partners. So if a site in a country gives ad space to Google for us to sell it, and when they do that, we share the revenue with them, which is why they do that, we will be able to show on their sites. So very often, for example, you might say, I have a product and I want to target people between the age of 25 and 34 who play a lot of tennis. And so we'll be looking at which of our publishing sites, and you could say that's in Germany, so which of our publishing sites in Germany cater to that age group playing tennis. Maybe there are 3 or 4 German tennis magazines. So if we can look for which of our publisher sites target people selling industrial goods in Argentina. But I'm not sure if we have a deal with that specific site. But we do have a lot of publishers in these countries, and you can go on to AdWords and choose to show on the Google Display Network in a particular country, and that will show you on those kinds of websites. But I can't speak to that specific site.
Okay, I was just giving an example. So when I'm adding the AdWord, it will show me in what kind of web search in that country you will advertise, so you will show my AdWord, right?
It will not give you the list of publisher sites. It will tell you that we are going to find publisher sites that meet a certain criteria.
You can both, this is a little bit more in-depth about the Google Display Network, and you can both contextually target, which means display your ads on when relevant topics based on sort of keywords that you provide are being discussed in articles, etc. The other thing is, if in fact the site that you're referring to is one of our publisher partners, you can placement target on it.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
I hope this helps. Sounds like a very specific
because
case
we
that you're
sell industrial products, and it appears right now that Google is directed more to consumer products, although you do have DigiKey, which I buy from, also on the Google, but it's not quite defined yet for industrial products, I guess.
I will say that we actually have quite a few industrial product companies. We have companies from earth movers to, as Eliza said, major equipment providers out there that are advertising with you, and many of them are using traditional types of advertising to generate leads for potential interest in buying their goods. And what I can tell you from experience and from talking to these same advertisers, these same small businesses, that when they use Google AdWords to find these audiences, they find that their return on investment for their ad dollar is much more effective. So I'll leave you with that from the experience that we've had.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Isaac. Sir, your line is open.
Thank you. Basically, you've been talking a lot about AdWords. I guess my question is the organic listings overseas. Does that sort of work the same way that it would work here in the U.S.? Would we be beating out, local websites that are selling the same product we want to export? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, basically organic overseas works the same as organic here in terms of looking at relevance for the website to what people are looking for. Mike, you'll need to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is you would then have to have a translated website, because it'll be, if they're looking up beret, and it's not to look at beret like because they want a French hat, but beret because that's the word they use, or chapeau, whatever, in French, then your website will actually have to exhibit that word chapeau and be translated for the French market.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
So would the Google Translate tool do that, or that's sort of a tool that allows you, it's a quick fix, but for organically showing it in that language, we would have to have the higher end version of going, buying the bullet and creating a website.
Localization, yeah, that's a really great point, and that's exactly how we're looking at this. What we suggest that you do is you embed the Google Translate web element for a quick experiment, right? See if users are actually coming into your site from overseas, you will not be getting the benefit of organic search traffic because there's nothing for us to index, right? Everything is actually done on the fly. Another way of testing that is to actually just do some light ads on Google on AdWords overseas to just see if you can actually attract the traffic to there. And then what you can do at that point, what we're really trying to encourage people to do is make a data-driven decision, right? If you know that there's a lot of demand for your product overseas, we do recommend that you bite the bullet and go into full localization, and that's one of the main reasons why Google has actually developed tools like Google Translator Toolkit. Google Translator Toolkit should actually help speed up localization for you. We don't have a lot of the data that we have from a lot of our users tells us something along the lines of the fact that you can translate about 2 to 5 times faster using Translator Toolkit. And so what we're hoping is that this will actually take a lot of the sting of full localization for you.
Okay, so you're saying if the overseas searcher searches in English, there's a chance that we might organically show up if we do everything correct. But if they're searching in their foreign language and our site is in English, obviously, then we're not going to be anywhere near.
Well, okay, so let's look at 2 things. So if the user overseas, so I guess I'm not quite sure if you're talking about organic search results on Google or AdWords, or whether or not the AdWords ad actually shows up, because those are slightly different things. Right.
I was referring to completely organic, the free.
Okay, so the free one is, so let's say, for example, you're just selling hats on your website, right, and it's all about hats, and you embed the Google Translate web element into this. And if a French user happens to land on your site, then we will translate it automatically into French. If a French user is looking for, I don't know, unfortunately, how you translate, let's say it's beret. Into France, right? And they're searching for beret instead. Unless, they will actually not get your English website. They will actually just get you. They will not get this in the automatic. In the organic search results. They will not get your French website because that website does not exist and there's nothing for us to index. They might land on your English website that's automatically translated into French if you bid on the keyword beret in AdWords. That's probably the most direct link that you can do. That's the most that's probably the fastest way in which you can reach those French users today. If you leave your website in English and you're really just relying on the automatic translation to draw that traffic to your site. It's really just Google AdWords.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Our last question comes from Jorge. Sir, your line is open.
Hello there. I got one more question. Does Google know what percentage of Internet traffic in the United States originates overseas? Ballpark.
We don't have that statistic available. But you can, again, with Translate, you can test that a bit, or if it's English language, that's a bit harder to find. But by collecting leads, you can probably tell that. But there's a fair amount that comes in from overseas. I can definitely tell you that.
Right. That was the reason of my question. Are we talking 10%? Are we talking 50%?
I think that varies based on your business, right? Let's say, for example, if you look at Google, I think half of our business actually comes from overseas, roughly. Right? But that's because we have a product that kind of has an appeal to a global audience. It really will vary based on your business. So if you're selling widgets, that's really just relevant to the States. You won't get that 50%. So telling you that it's 50% is somewhat meaningless. What I would probably look at, the best thing for you to do is to just look at Google Analytics. I've talked to quite a few advertisers about this exact topic, and what they typically do is if you embed Google Analytics into your site, you can actually see the split of, say, the fact that surprisingly, you could actually find that 20% of your users are coming from Mexico. That's one way of looking at it. Another thing that you might be able to find is that 10% of your users might be coming, say, from Canada, right? Like those are the different statistics that you might find, and I think that's probably more relevant than just giving you a rough estimate of what it is in the aggregate for everyone.
Yep, that's a better answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I show no more questions at this time.
Okay, we're about at the end of our program as well for our allotted time. And at this time, I'd like to thank everyone today for participating in the program and extend a special thanks to our Google partners for their time today and insights on how to go global. I do want to mention that on September 14th at 10 a.m., one of our field offices will be hosting a free webinar entitled Taking U.S. Manufacturers Global with ThomasNet in the Commercial Service. This program, as well as follow-on programs in e-commerce, this is the first of a part of 4, released by the Information and Communications team, can be found on our www.export.gov site under webinars. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see it. And does Google have any closing comments they would like to make today?
I'd just like to thank folks for their time and really encourage you to take advantage of the opportunities overseas. These markets are growing fast. There are undoubtedly consumers, businesses that would benefit from your services, and we'd love to help you get there faster and most effectively. So we look forward to it and really encourage you to explore some of the tools that Elise and Michael have highlighted today. They're very powerful and can make a big difference in finding international markets. So thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you again for participating. And for the operator, could you please end this call, but the speakers would like to remain on the call for a moment more.
Yes, ma'am. If you do like to disconnect at this time, the conference call is over with, and you have a great day.